Waking up early has been a constant battle in my life. As a kid, my parents would struggle waking me up, getting me out of bed, showering, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, and out the door to make it to school on time. The only time I could wake up early was on Saturday morning, before 8:30, just so I could sit and watch cartoons for hours. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Once I was in front of that TV though, I was not moving for the next 4 hours, because between CBS, Fox, and ABC, Saturday mornings were loaded with heavy hitter cartoons, including Sonic the Hedgehog, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Aladdin, Animaniacs, The Tick, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego, and Garfield and Friends. If that didn't keep you in front of your TV, then your power must have been out, because there's no other reasonable explanation for a cartoon-loving kid to not watch those cartoons. There is one show I did leave out, however, one that looked like nothing else on TV at the time. A stop-motion show called Bump in the Night, about a small, green monster and his friends who come out from the shadows when the 10-year-old whose bedroom they live in goes to sleep. Think Toy Story mixed with real monsters, dirty socks, and explosions. And if that doesn't pique your interest, nothing will. So, let's dust off the long-forgotten Saturday morning cartoon staple and talk about Bump in the Night. In the late 80s and early 90s, audiences were in a bit of a golden age when it came to stop-motion animation. In a 6-year span, we had 1989's Academy Award-winning Creature Comforts, 1993's Academy Award-winning Nightmare Before Christmas, 1994's Academy Award-winning Wallace and Gromit: The Wrong Trousers, and 1995's Academy Award-winning Wallace and Gromit: A Close Shave. In 1994, during the surge in popularity in stop-motion animation, is where Bump in the Night pops up. And looking back, it's pretty incredible. Having a stop-motion, claymation-looking TV series wasn't something networks were taking risks on at the time. In an article titled Bump in the Night, the cult hit cartoon that made monsters beautiful by Trey Taylor, Jenny Trias, then VP of Children's Programming at ABC, asked Ken Pontac and boyhood pal and co-creator David Bleeman to pitch a stop-motion kids show to boost the Saturday morning bill. Trias states that ABC execs decided a couple of seasons ago that visually, Saturday morning was getting somewhat similar on all the networks. As a result, we went looking for visually stimulating shows. So in that regard, Pontac and Bleeman were on the same page. Pontac says, "We wanted a character who was basically just a big expressive face, and after playing around with some designs, came up with Mr. Bumpy," explains series co-creator Ken Pontac. The concept for Bump in the Night apparently had been on his mind since childhood. Ken recalls his mother saying, "You've been drawing that thing, Mr. Bumpy, since you were 7 years old." And I rather ungraciously reminded her how she used to tell me to stop drawing monsters and draw something nice. The development of Bump in the Night began as a series of ad bumpers for ABC's Saturday morning lineup in 1993, and in 1994, Bump in the Night turned into a 30-minute show, directed by series creators David Bleeman, who had previously worked on Gumby Adventures and the video game Play Fighter, and Ken Pontac, who more recently has worked in multiple mediums, from writing for the web show Happy Tree Friends, the comic book Justice League Unlimited, and the video game Sonic Generations. The prior experience the two had with stop motion gives the show its biggest strength. The show looks and operates fantastically. Really some of the best I've seen, especially considering they're on a television budget rather than a movie budget. The backgrounds and sets are also amazing. They're so detailed, they look like something out of a Tim Burton children's book. And Mr. Bumpy and his friends all move incredibly smoothly. And considering how complex Mr. Bumpy's body is, with gangly limbs and tentacle eyes, it's all the more impressive. The series itself is split into two roughly 12-minute segments and is episodic with infrequent but loosely connecting story arcs. It takes place in a suburban home in the room of the boy, the bedroom of a 10-year-old boy. When the sun goes down and the boy goes to sleep, the various miniature monsters and toys in the house come to life and commiserate with each other. The show immediately puts its best foot forward with its theme song, a catchy little ditty in the style of 50s swing music with similarities in my mind to Elvis Presley's blue suede shoes. It's a great indicator of how much fun we'll be having during the show. The main character, Mr. Bumpy, is a fast-talking, gross but cool guy, expertly voiced by Jim Cummings, who has voiced hundreds of roles, and his voice is immediately identifiable. You most likely know him as Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Pete from Goof Troop, and one of my favorite characters of all time, Darkwing Duck. And this is the character that Mr. Bumpy most closely resembles. He's a kind-hearted narcissist, if that's not too much of a contradiction. And like Darkwing Duck, Mr. Bumpy is similar to a child. He's self-absorbed, but he's got a good heart and cares deeply about his friends. His best friend Squishington is a blue monster who lives in the top of a toilet tank, is also a clean freak, and is constantly nervous, always worried about what can go wrong. Think Chucky Finster from Rugrats. Finally, we have Molly, a doll that belongs to the little sister. Her purpose is to give comfort. She's fun and has the widest range of personality throughout the show. What first struck me is how quickly I enjoy the characters. Mr. Bumpy is so full of himself, but in an endearing way. And aside from the puns, which I can't get behind for any reasons, Mr. Bumpy's lines at the very worst are entertaining, and at best, pretty hilarious, with quips such as, "If you hear something go bump in the night, call a parent or someone you can trust, and let them get eaten by a burglar or a monster or whatever." The writing is definitely spot on, and is another highlight of this great show. Having said that, with most shows, there's a bit of a learning curve with the characters and the writers figuring out the world. With Bump in the Night, I'm surprised to say, not only are there a large number of truly excellent episodes, I'd say the quality of the worst ones are still really good, which leads me to be shocked that there's not more of a following for Bump in the Night, at least not a visible one from what I can tell. Although you can technically say the show is shallow on the plot, the way they get to these different scenarios is so cartoony in the most fun ways. I would laugh when I saw how the characters would get themselves into these situations. One of my favorite episodes was one in which Mr. Bumpy wants one of his favorite foods, gum. And when he learns that gum lasts in your stomach for 7 years, he eats himself to try and get it, answering the age-old question, what would happen if you could eat or swallow yourself whole? Well, it turns out it creates a vortex, sucking himself and his best friend Squishington into Mr. Bumpy's body or soul. I'm honestly really not sure how they got there or where they were, but it was really funny to watch. And while they're inside of Mr. Bumpy, he meets living versions of his stomach, heart, and brain, all personified. And when he learns that the world will blow up if he doesn't give up eating gum, it leads to a hilarious result, and the ending is so wonderfully silly. Another one of my favorites being when Squishington says to Mr. Bumpy he'd give him a penny for his thoughts, and a penny falls from the sky, which is good at first. But then for every thought Mr. Bumpy has, another penny falls, which leads to an insufferable existence for Mr. Bumpy. The show has a lot of these really wonderfully zany adventures, especially in the first season. It only lasted 2 seasons, but like most shows, Season 2 is different from Season 1 in some of the approaches. Season 2 brings in a lot more side characters more frequently. Destructo, the no-nonsense action figure, the cute dolls, various bugs, and a closet monster who looks cool, and I remember being particularly creepy as a child. Considering this is supposed to be just a kids show, the ensemble ends up being really deep and each bringing a different unique brand of comedy that ends up making the show funny in so many different ways. Now there are a few minor things I couldn't help but notice about this show that were somewhat, not bad, just more distracting than anything else. The first, and this becomes extremely apparent in the second season, they reuse a lot of animations and shots. Maybe because I watched the series so close together, but it's extremely noticeable. This one close-up of Squishington in particular, holding his head and focusing on his eyes and top lip, anytime there was a close-up needed, that would be the shot used. It won't take you out of the show. Again, this was a weekly show, so I'm sure kids wouldn't remember at the time, but just watching it through, it was maddening how many times I would see the shot, not even just episode to episode, but within the episode. Again, it won't take you out of the show, it's just glaringly obvious and becomes distracting to a point. Another thing that was strange was the close-ups. They do close-ups of Bumpy and Squishington to show their faces, but instead, they only get the eyes and sometimes the top of the lip, maybe the eyes and none of the lip, or maybe just the top lip and the bottom of the eyes. I don't know if this was a budget constraint, a camera constraint, I'm really not sure what it is, but it was very strange to see characters talking and their eyes moving, but not focused, and sometimes their top lip. It's really baffling to me. I would love to know an answer if anybody has one. And the last is the songs. Season 2 has a few songs, and they're not bad by any measure. In fact, most of them are quite good, but they're extremely long, with some of them lasting 4 minutes minimum. That's right, 4 minutes minimum. These episodes are usually about 12 minutes long, and I believe one of the songs actually took up the entire episode. But instead of using that to their advantage, where they can do fun animations under the song, they end up being clip shows for the most part. I'd say if there's about 5 songs, 4 of them just reuse clips from the previous episodes. Why would you do that if you have a totally new song and it's not a clip show? It's just really strange not to take advantage of that opportunity you have. I'm assuming it's budget constraints or time constraints, which is fair, but it's just very strange to do. Saying that though, there is one song, a gospel song that Mr. Bumpy and Squishington sing. It's hilarious. It's one of the highlights of the series. A definite must-watch scene. Speaking of highlights, here's some episodes I'd recommend if you're considering checking out the series. Gum Crazy, where Bumpy eats himself whole to try to get the gum that's in his stomach. Baby Snail, where Mr. Bumpy has to babysit a baby snail before her mom comes home. To Sleep, Perchance to Burp, Mr. Bumpy makes too much noise keeping the boy up all night. Penny for Your Thoughts, where a penny hits Mr. Bumpy in the head every time he thinks about something. Farewell to Arms, where Molly wants to be more powerful so she gets better limbs. And Water Way to Go, where the family turns off the toilet for the night, causing Squishington to dry up. After watching all of Bump in the Night, I began to think about its legacy. What is there to say about this show? It wasn't revolutionary from a technical stance, nobody went on to gain standout stardom, and the show itself is hardly mentioned. So what is there to it? Well, I'd say it was the perfect cartoon at the perfect time. Rewatching it, I found myself getting as excited today as I did when I was wearing footy pajamas as a kid all those years ago. It's not only held up visually and content-wise, but exceeded my expectations in both those factions as to how good I thought it would be. It brought me back to a feeling of when I woke up to eat sugary cereal, play outside, and wishing I could have eaten pizza with the Ninja Turtles. I can't say enough how enjoyable it was to go back and watch this show again, and if you want to escape back to a time where you were as excited to watch the toy commercials as much as the shows they were based on, then this is the show you'll want to get bumping to.